Have you ever heard of a weapon soldiers whispered about, calling it the meat grinder? 4 barrels, 40 rounds a second, a leaden squall that could turn everything living into a bloody mess in mere moments. In this episode, we tell a story that will chill your blood. We'll uncover the uncomfortable truth about the shameful, panicked flight of an entire company that abandoned the front to its fate, and how one single 20-year-old man chose to redeem that disgrace in the most brutal way possible. He did the unthinkable. He pivoted an anti-aircraft gun designed to shred the metal of planes to mow down men on the ground, creating a genuine slaughter for the enemy. But that's just the beginning. You're about to hear the story of a daring, almost suicidal night raid deep behind enemy lines, where a dozen heavily armed Germans were humiliated in the most scandalous and ridiculous manner. They were forced to surrender while literally holding up their own trousers. This detail sounds like a joke, but the climax of the scene turned out to be horrifying and tragic. Watch until the end to discover how one man with an iron fist stopped an entire unit, and the terrible, debilitating price he paid for his triumph. This is the story of Lieutenant Strelbitsky, a chronicle of rage, blood, and incredible courage that official reports stayed silent about. In the annals of the Great Patriotic War, there are countless examples of how technical ingenuity and engineering genius, cornered by circumstance, gave birth to true masterpieces. Yet among the many legendary weapons, one creation stands alone, its fame forged under conditions for which it was never intended. We are talking about the 7.62mm quad anti-aircraft mount, model 1931. In official documents, it went by a complicated index, but in the trenches it was known differently. Some called it the Maxim M4, others the meat grinder, but the most accurate nickname was the unified fist. This weapon did not just embody the ultimate concentration of firepower, it became a symbol of the capacity to take a proven idea and push it to terrifying perfection.
The history of this mount dates back to the late 1920s, when military theorists looked anxiously at the skies. Aviation was developing rapidly. Planes were becoming faster and more dangerous to ground troops. A standard rifle or single machine gun could no longer protect infantry on the march from daring fighter-bomber raids. An answer was needed. Fast, harsh, and massive. The task of creating such a complex fell to the designers of the Tula arms plant. The challenge was accepted by Nikolai Fyodorovich Tokarev, the son of a celebrated gunsmith. He faced the dilemma: develop a new system from scratch, or find a solution in the existing arsenal. Tokarev chose the second path, turning to the legendary, reliable Maxim machine gun, model 1910. This heavy, water-cooled machine was famous for its ability to maintain continuous fire for hours. The engineering concept was brilliantly simple: multiply the Maxim's effectiveness by 4. The designer combined 4 machine guns into a single system on a specialized anti-aircraft carriage. This required creating a unique sighting system, a single firing mechanism, and a meticulously designed forced water circulation, since 4 barrels generated a colossal amount of heat. Thus, the mount was born, capable of 360-degree firing and raising its barrels almost vertically. When this system began to speak, the effect was stunning. 4 barrels firing in sync delivered a combined rate of fire of 2,400 rounds per minute. It was a true steel deluge, a wall of metal that not even a fly could pass through. The M4's original purpose was strictly celestial: to shoot down diving fighter bombers and bombers at altitudes up to 1.5 miles. However, war shatters all instructions. Fate decreed that this weapon's finest hour would strike not in duels with Junkers aircraft, but on the frozen ground. In the tragic year of 1941, when the front lines were collapsing and the infantry desperately needed support, this anti-aircraft fist became the last argument in close combat. The weapon created for the clouds became the last hope on Earth, capable of stopping the living waves of the advancing enemy. And the story of how this happened belongs to a young lieutenant whose decision forever wrote his name into the chronicle of the war.
To grasp the scale of the feat, one must transport themselves to the harsh reality of the frontline autumn of 1941. The transition from the story of the formidable machine to the story of the human spirit lies through the threshold of a simple village house that served as a temporary sanctuary. Here, at last, came a brief and much-desired respite. It was a late, gray afternoon. The sky was covered with leaden clouds. The cold was already penetrating to the bone, turning the roads into an icy, muddy mess. Inside the house, it was quiet. A small group of frontline scouts, the regiment's elite, had just returned from an arduous night raid. The men were practically collapsing from exhaustion. Their only wish was to fall into a deep sleep. The silence, broken only by the crackling of wood and the heavy breathing of the sleepers, seemed like an incredible luxury. Every minute in this relative warmth was perceived as a gift from fate. Among the men was their platoon commander, Lieutenant Vladimir Vasilievich Strelbitsky. He was only 20 years old, but wore a race's age. His movements were sparse, and his gaze was heavy, betraying a veteran who knew the value of seconds. He lay with everyone else, but even in sleep, his face retained an expression of concentration. The contrast between the tension of the recent mission and this near-idyllic rest was striking. The men slept huddled together, pressing against each other to conserve warmth. Their greatcoats served as both bedding and blanket. It seemed the war had receded, giving them a chance just to be men. But peace on the front line is only a thin veil, ready to tear at any moment. The scout's life had developed a special animal instinct in Strelbitsky. His body reacted faster than his mind. This reflex kicked in now. A sharp sound. The door of the house flew open with a deafening crash, letting in a cloud of cold steam. Even before his eyes opened, Vladimir's fingers were already gripping the steel of his submachine gun. Sleep vanished instantly. Following the slam of the door, the silence was pierced by the sentry's frantic cry, "The Germans have broken through!" The idyll collapsed, replaced by the icy horror of reality.
The awakening was brutal. Adrenaline surged into his blood, making his heart pound furiously. A commotion began inside the house. The men leaped up, grabbing their weapons. Everyone rushed outside into the gray chill of the day. Outside, Strelbitsky instantly assessed the situation. The scene was disheartening. The sounds of firing and screams came from the left flank, which the 3rd Rifle Company was supposed to hold. But what the lieutenant saw was a commander's worst nightmare. Instead of an organized defense, he saw chaos. Along the muddy street, stumbling, men in his comrades' uniforms were running. The soldiers of the 3rd Company were abandoning their positions, overwhelmed by that same crippling fear that turns a unit into a mob. They weren't even attempting to fire back. It was a panicked flight, threatening catastrophe for the entire regiment. The defense on the key sector had effectively ceased to exist. A massive gap had formed into which the enemy infantry was about to pour. Strelbitsky understood. If the Germans realized there was no resistance, they would burst into the center of the village, capture the headquarters, and destroy the main forces with a strike to the rear. His thoughts raced. His tiny platoon of exhausted scouts could not close this breach in an open field. To form a human chain would mean certain death. Another solution was needed. Vladimir Vasilievich gave a harsh order: disperse behind the buildings, take up defensive positions. The scouts immediately scattered across the yards, preparing to sell their lives dearly. And then, amidst the chaos, the commander's gaze snagged on one detail. Near the headquarters building, on a raised position, stood that same anti-aircraft mount, the unified fist. It was silent, its barrels pointing at the sky, and no one was around. A terrible realization struck Strelbitsky. Why was the steel monster, capable of grinding up a battalion, not firing? Where was the crew?
Realizing that the most powerful weapon was silent, Strelbitsky made a decision instantly. Leaving his men to cover the retreat, he ran toward the headquarters. His feet slipped on the mud, but he was driven by fury. How could anyone abandon such power when it was needed most? When he reached the position, his worst fears were confirmed. Sandbags, ammunition belts, everything was in place, but the men were gone. The anti-aircraft crew, yielding to panic, had fled, abandoning their equipment. They left the machine capable of stopping a platoon, turning it into useless metal. The lieutenant felt a cold rage boil up inside him. It was a feeling of absolute concentration. He was alone, but he had the Maxim M4. At that moment, he noticed movement. On the outskirts of the village, the gray-green figures of the fascists appeared. They walked confidently, standing tall, marching forward, believing the path was clear. Their arrogance was visible in every gesture. They were still hundreds of yards away. There was no time for contemplation. The lieutenant jumped into the gunner's seat. His hands habitually grasped the grips. This was not his standard weapon, but a commander must know how to fight with everything. The anti-aircraft gun, whose barrels were aimed at the sky, lowered with a clang. In one motion, it was shifted to horizontal fire. From an anti-air shield, it was transformed into a machine gun turret aimed squarely at the infantry's chest. The enemy hadn't yet noticed the maneuver, continuing down the empty street. This mistake became fatal for them. The decisive seconds arrived. Vladimir Vasilyevich looked through the sight, seeing the approaching silhouettes. He did not fire immediately, showing supreme restraint. He let them approach to point-blank range, so that every shot would find its target. When the details of their uniforms were distinguishable, Strelbitsky slammed the trigger. The world exploded. The 4 barrels roared simultaneously, merging into a deafening sound. It was a bass that made the earth vibrate. The mount spewed a fire avalanche. The concentrated steel storm slammed into the street. The effect was monstrous. The density of fire, calculated for duralumin wings, proved fatal for the infantry. Bullets tore through walls, shredded fences, leaving no cover. Strelbitsky guided the barrels as if watering a garden with red-hot metal. He felt a grim satisfaction as his rage was transmuted into this torrent of destruction. The Germans did not expect such a repulse. The front ranks were mowed down. Those in the rear tried to lie flat, but the fire was too dense and low. Bullets exploded the soil, creating a zone of continuous impact. The advance stalled. Realizing the futility of fighting this death machine, the Germans wavered. Fear overcame discipline, and they ran back. Strelbitsky did not release the trigger, pursuing the fleeing men with fire. The casing steamed. The empty shells fell like a ringing stream. The roar was so loud it was deafening. This continued until the machine guns gave a dry click. The belts were empty. The victory was absolute. When silence fell, Strelbitsky couldn't stand up immediately. His hands, gripping the controls, seemed fused to the metal. He sat, breathing heavily. He had done the impossible. He stopped the breakthrough through the efforts of one man. Seeing this, the soldiers of the 3rd Company began to return. Shame turned into determination, and they rushed to pursue the enemy. When the smoke cleared, the scouts and the regimental commander approached the position. The officers were grim, but respect shone in their eyes. Everyone understood. Vladimir Vasilyevich had saved the regiment from rout. His action went beyond the bounds of regulations. It was a manifestation of will that broke the course of the battle. But war allows no time for rest. The regimental commander quickly restored order and detained Strelbitsky.
The colonel's face was stern. The success of one battle opened the doors for the next task. Listen to your mission, Lieutenant. The Germans have retreated, but we don't know their strength. We need a tongue, a prisoner, immediately.
The task was daunting. As darkness fell, Strelbitsky's group had to secretly cross the front line and move behind enemy lines to the village of Rye Alexandrovka. There, they were to lie in wait in the ruined stables. The goal? Capture a prisoner capable of revealing enemy plans. It was a suicidal mission where the price of error was the annihilation of the entire group. Strelbitsky nodded silently. The preparation was short. As soon as darkness covered the earth, the group set out. Crossing the front line went smoothly, aided by a diversionary artillery barrage from our batteries. The scouts slipped into the gray zone and advanced deep into the rear. Reaching Rye Alexandrovka, they hid in the half-ruined stables. Soon, they noticed movement and heard foreign speech. The Germans were there. The exhausting wait for the deadest pre-dawn hours began. They began to act just before dawn. The experienced scout Kopylov silently eliminated the sentry. The path was clear. The group of 4 crept up to a large house that served as a billet. Strelbitsky carefully turned the doorknob. The men slipped inside. It was warm inside, smelling of tobacco. Germans were sleeping on the floor, their rifles stacked in a pyramid against the wall. A dim battery lamp provided light. Looking closer, the commander froze. There were not 2 or 3 enemies, but no less than a dozen strong men. The situation was out of control. Taking one quietly was impossible. They were sleeping too close together. Taking them all at once seemed insane for 4 men. Any noise would wake the garrison and the group would be trapped. The task looked impossible. In this critical moment, Vladimir Strelbitsky made a daring decision. He realized retreat was impossible. Taking one was too risky. He decided to take them all. The commander silently assigned targets, walked up to the nearest German and roughly kicked him with his boot. The German jumped up and yelled. The others, awakening, were stunned to see guns pointed at them. Their rifles were far away, against the wall. Realizing their predicament, the Germans huddled together. Strelbitsky authoritatively announced that they were taking everyone. The prisoners were ordered to remove their belts. The calculation was precise. A man forced to hold up his trousers with both hands feels helpless and restricted in movement. It was a demoralizing maneuver. The Germans began to comply, but one of them, realizing the shame, grabbed a mess kit and smashed the lamp. In the darkness, our soldier fired a short burst at the sound. The quick-witted enemy fell. The shots sounded like thunder, reminding the others that the games were over. Broken, the Germans, holding up their pants, left the house. The group moved toward the forest, but the shots had awakened the garrison and a commotion began. The commander sent the prisoners forward with the main group, while he and 3 men stayed behind for cover. As they were retreating, a black object flew out of the window of the abandoned house. The scouts hadn't noticed a concealed German. It was a grenade. The explosion was deafening. Kopylov, a loyal friend, died instantly. 2 soldiers were wounded. The commander himself was thrown back by the blast wave, shrapnel tearing his face, arm, and stomach. The pain was unbearable, and Vladimir succumbed to darkness. What followed was an act of brotherhood. The wounded commander was not abandoned. Gathering their last strength, the scouts dragged him through the forest and swamps. Kopylov's body could not be recovered. It would have slowed the group and doomed everyone. A heavy but unavoidable decision. The mission was accomplished. 8 tongues were delivered to headquarters. But the price of success was high. In the frontline hospital, Strelbitsky's condition worsened. He was evacuated to the rear, to the city of Kluhori.
Recovery took half a year, a battle with pain and weakness, a long healing process for his arm. Thanks to his perseverance, Vladimir was back on his feet, dreaming of returning to the ranks. But the commission's verdict was harsh, unfit for frontline duty, disability. It seemed his career was over, but Strelbitsky did not give up. Until the end of the war, he worked at the 1st Infantry School in Kuibyshev, passing on his experience to cadets. He taught them composure and responsibility, the very things that saved him in 41. Later, promotion and service in military intelligence awaited him. His unique blend of experience and willpower was in demand among the elite. His missions now took place beyond the borders of the motherland, on the fronts of the Cold War, where intellect and diplomacy were required. Thus, he proved that true heroism has no expiration date and can manifest on any frontier, defending the country just as reliably as that very unified fist, Yedini Kulak.